Morning, everyone. How are you guys? Glad you could be here for Laura and my presentation on some appraisal topics. Want to say thanks to AGS for doing all these webinars. There's been so many of them. Hopefully we're not at quite webinar burnout speed or burnout time yet, and you get something out of this. So we're going to do this in two parts. We'll have Laura do a little bit of a section, then switch over to me, and then we'll do questions and answers on the whole thing at the end. So go ahead, Laura, start.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm also happy to be here participating in AGS's webinar series. I'm Laura Stanley. I'm the CGA instructor from Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm a third generation jeweler and a second generation AGS jeweler. My father joined AGS the year I was born, so I like to think of myself as a member from birth. I am delighted to be a part of this amazing webinar world that we're living in. And I'm very happy to talk about the components of an appraisal and also that go into a quality appraisal, and also a few other fun appraisal topics, keeping the details that go into making a quality appraisal top of mind. I earned my CGA in 1996, and I estimate that I've performed or helped perform over 3,000 appraisals since then. By far the majority of them have been for insurance, but I've also done my fair share of estate appraisals. Also, while running the family store, we pumped out thousands of insurance reports every year for items we had sold. I used to get a little irritated when somebody wanted a report on like a $200 pair of sterling silver earrings, but it's a reminder how important and how special our jobs are and how important we are to our clients. So I try to have a better attitude about it because it's an indicator of how special we are and our product is to them. So even if the price point is low, they deserve a nice appraisal or report on their new purchase. So now let's talk about appraisals. The anatomy of an appraisal. There are several components needed to create a successful, accurate, and thorough appraisal, and they make up the body of the assignment, in my mind. There's the cover letter, the narrative, description, value, the limiting conditions, any exculpation clauses, and last but by no means least, your CV. We will discuss all of these in detail, and then we'll touch on delivery style methods before we go to Joel. That will segue into Joel's presentation on current procedures and topics of interest in 2020, including virtual appraisals and limitations and safety in general. In today's world, that is more important than ever. Here is the book. If you're thinking about doing appraisals or you're doing appraisals, if you're not a CGA and you don't already have this book, highly recommend. It is great reference material. It will give you guidance in every area of appraising. And I cannot overstate how much good information is in this book. It's about $100, and there's Kaz's email. He will ship you one if you want one. Just email him and he'll do it. Okay. While the description and value is the heart of an appraisal, I feel like there are many other contributing components making a solid legal document. And as always, it's important to remember presentation is everything. You want to make your document attractive and tidy. You want to make it reflect your skill, your experience, and your professionalism. Have sharp photos or CAD images, print on quality paper, and don't skimp. If a client wants a copy or two or three, print out new copies. Don't just photocopy. You want it's the printed impression of you that they are taking with them and keeping forever in their files. Keep in mind that you also want to be able to charge an appropriate amount for your services. So you need to make sure your client sees a product worthy of your cost. My appraisal started about $125, which is about $125 an hour is how I think of it in my head. But I know many jewelers and independent appraisers start higher than that. And I will say that if you start much lower than that, I think you should consider raising your prices because you are probably not charging enough. Now, I use a word template. Lots of people use software. There are many good software systems out there, and there are other templates out there. Any are fine as long as they work for you. What matters is the content, not how you get it together. I have great flexibility with this template. See where I highlighted? That's kind of what I change the most often, what kind of document it is. And I can change the headline. See here, I can change from estate appraisal to fine jewelry appraisal or insurance replacement document or whatever it needs to be. And then down here, I can put a little blurb about what's coming. There are, I'm sure, a million different ways to do this. We all do what works for us. The important thing, again, is to have all the information there. There's also on screen a copy of what Joel does, and they're very similar cover pages. Okay, the narrative. This is like the catch-all. In the narrative, you can elaborate on anything you need to elaborate on, anything that's not just a normal standard thing. This is a place where you could write a novel about the assignment if you need to. It's really, I think of it as a pre-description page, but only if you need it. Some reports are very cut and dry and they don't need a narrative at all, other than a paragraph about what kind of report you have. You can elaborate on the intended usage of the report, the uniqueness of the item, the unusual circumstances surrounding the assignment, the condition of the item, the history, its provenance, anything you need, anything that is not just a typical component of an appraisal, this is where it goes. If you need to insert a photo of Elvis wearing that diamond pendant, this is where you would do it in order to establish provenance. If you need to put in auction results to substantiate an unusual gemstone or diamond that's been sold, this is where you would put it. You can also use this section to talk about if you had to travel to the banker's office or the lawyer's office. If your gold tester tested 4 different ways on one piece of jewelry, this is where you would put in those results and say you had to make an assumption. If you went to the lawyer's office and the angry future ex-wife was standing over your shoulder and wouldn't let you take the ring out of her sight, so you couldn't clean it properly, this is where that goes. If there's an old EGL report that you don't agree with, you could put that in here. So as I said, anything that's not standard, the narrative is a good place to put it. This is just anything that doesn't fit into the norm. This page and the limiting conditions pages might overlap, but the rule is, and the idea here is, just disclose everything and disclaim to your comfort level, because you have to sign it and you have to be able to stand behind it. And you want it all in writing for everyone to see. Now, it's worth noting that there are 2 types of reports that we mostly all do. There's the appraisal report, and then there's a statement of replacement cost. And the main difference is, did you sell it? A jewelry appraisal reflects the market within a geographic area, in our case, usually the United States. The appraised value should reflect the most commonly occurring selling price reasonably expected in retail establishments, commonly in the business of buying and selling similar items. And establishing this value requires the study, jewelry knowledge, and understanding that we all have, the ability to look for comparisons, the attention to details, and market knowledge. In contrast, a statement of replacement is just simply stating what an item would cost to replace. And it describes the item in detail, just like an appraisal would, but it's titled differently. The critical difference here is that you sold it. You never want to put yourself in the position of being questioned in regards to your sale price, either high or low. There is additionally, interestingly, legal precedent for an insurance company denying a claim due to the selling price being less than the appraisal value. And because the retailer termed it an appraisal and did not disclose that they had sold the item and did not explain why there was a difference in price, it became a problem for the insured. And so you don't want to do that. There are many reasons to sell a piece of jewelry for less than your appraised value or your replacement cost value. It could be a piece of dated merchandise you've had in stock for 15 years and you just liquidated it. It could be you're liquidating a designer that you are no longer going to carry. It could be an estate item, previously owned item. It could just be it was on sale, and so you sold it for less than the standard price. These are all fine. You just need to be clear and make sure you title the report appropriately, so to keep yourself and your client out of trouble. Now, the description page relates back to the narrative page a little. I like to use my descriptions in paragraph form, but I definitely will use bullet points, or I'll break up the description into smaller paragraphs whenever there are lots of subsets of stones or details, or just to make it easier to read. It can be very hard to read one giant paragraph describing a piece of jewelry with 185 different stones. So I like to just make it readable. You want the reader or the insurance agent or the purchaser or whomever to form an image of the jewelry in their head when they read your description. So read it aloud to yourself and make sure that it works and that it flows well. This is especially important because eventually one day someone's going to pull out that appraisal because the piece of jewelry is gone. And not only do you need to be able to know what it looks like in case there's no photograph with it, whoever else is dealing with the replacement or the claim needs to be able to do that too. Photographs fade, photographs vanish, and sometimes all you have are the words. Typical insurance company listing schedules, as we've all seen, they're just words and values. They don't have the photographs with them. So writing a good description for yourself and for the future jeweler who has to deal with it is a nice way to pay it forward. The valuation. So this is pretty cut and dry. One value per item, include your sales tax, put the photograph nearby, keep it easy to read. I can't tell you how many clients are just delighted when they can just flip one page at a time and see their description and their photograph and their value, because in the past they've had crammed, hard to read, hard to decipher reports, and they're just thrilled when it's easy. You just want to make it easy for them. 3 items per page is my personal limit, and that only works if they're really simple items like a gold chain or a plain gold wedding band. Anything complicated, probably you'll only get 2 per page, and maybe only 1, and sometimes not even 1. Sometimes you need 2 pages to describe a really elaborate piece of jewelry. But if you try to cram too many on a page, they're just going to think you're trying to save paper, and it makes you look bad. So don't do it. Make it easy for them, make it look nice. And here are a couple of samples. Here's one that I've done, and here's one that Joel did, and you can see it's all there on one page, and that's just a really nice way to do it. I use a template. Now you'll see the spine on mine, on the Laura Stanley one, the left spine, that's actually embedded into a Word document. And so that's something my father came up with 40 years ago. And it's really nice because even though it's a little bit redundant to have, because you got all of those disclaimers spelled out in much more detail throughout the whole appraisal package, it's my feeling that many appraisal packets are reduced to the one page, this page, pretty quickly after they get home because people are filing them or they're just pulling out the important part, right? So this way, you've always got the really important disclaimers in front of the client on the page with their description and their value. And the disclaimers on the spine are just, they touch on, we assume it's mass produced unless otherwise stated. We assume they're natural. We look for carat marks. It's replacing with a comparable piece. And then down at the bottom, it has a little bit about how if it's irreplaceable, we'll note that. And if you need any more information, and also our gemological training. And so it's just a nice way to keep those really important bullet points right there with the client at all times. And I can pull up the template and I can change where it says fine jewelry insurance. I can change that to fair market or estate or dissolution of marriage or whatever I need to. The main difference in mine, I think, and Joel's over here, he has a digital signature and he can talk more about that. I need to probably look into that. I'm a little behind the times. Okay, limiting conditions and exculpation clauses. These are just the things that keep you out of trouble. This section can be several pages long. Some disclaimers are long gone, like we used to always see there, no liability for any action taken on this appraisal can be held against the appraiser. Well, forget that because it doesn't matter. It won't hold up in court. So just take it out if you still have it. But newer disclaimers like talking about synthetic diamonds or assuming or, testing or referring, anything about the synthetic issue, treated gemstones, and what you are reasonably able to determine on your own without a lab report. Those are the kind of limiting conditions and exculpation clauses that you'll have in a modern appraisal. At the very least, everything's limited almost always. At the very least, a gemstone that's even just in a setting is limited by its setting, right? So you're always going to have something. It's just a question of how much. So you'll want to note if you have any interest in the item, if you're planning on making an offer, or if you have made an offer on it. You want to talk about what processes you use to evaluate the gems, the diamonds, and the jewelry, and if there are any limitations to these processes, and anything of that nature. So Joel's going to talk a little bit more about that when he comes up. Okay, here are two of his pages with some of his limiting conditions, and it's good to spell it out. It's just very good to spell it out. So you can ask him some questions about how he came up with all of his. Okay, the CV. I feel like this is really, really important. It's sort of like your resume, but not for getting the job, but because you already got the job, right? You've already done the job, but it's for validating the client's choice in their minds later on when they're at home reading the appraisal. So they feel good about their decision to hire you. So don't skimp on this. You want to list your gemological training, your professional training. If you're a CGA, that should be the first thing you list. Make sure to highlight really important things like that. If you're a GG, if you're a CG, if you're USPAP trained, whatever it is, make sure you list it. You should list all of your jewelry titles, your involvement in the industry, business qualifications, diplomas. And I think it's important to list something, just a little something about your community involvement, because it reminds people that you're a real person who lives in their community. And as we all know, shop local means live local. And it's a motto that we all sell by and live by every day. If you were nominated for an award, you could put that in there. If you were Jeweler of the Year at one time, anything to enhance your credibility. Also, I personally think that one page is sufficient. So if you have too much, it's just like a resume, call the old stuff or the less interesting stuff. I put this in the packet immediately following the jewelry description pages, because then they see it before they get to all the disclaimers and all the stuff that they're not going to read anyway. This is why you still have their attention. You want them to see, how fabulous you are. The point is to make it obvious to them that you are the jewelry professional that they need to come back to whenever they have any jewelry needs. And last but not least, in these socially distant times we live in, we all have to start doing business with a little more space between us and the client. So I am a big proponent of emailing the document. Now, contrary to the old school thinking of, bring the client back in your store, get him back, get him back, get him back. This is the opposite of that, right? Like, oh, I'll just email it to you. You don't have to come back. So this works really well if it's a small assignment and you can, I'll schedule someone to come in for an hour. If it's only a few pieces of jewelry, I'll get the photographs and all the details and everything I need. And then I'll send them home with their jewelry. And then I will email the document a few days later. You can't always do that. I know if it's a very large assignment, it's not going to work. So, you have to, every situation is different. We all know that. But sometimes even if it's a big appraisal, they'll say, I don't need the jewelry. Just send me the appraisal as soon as you can do it. I need to get it to my insurance. I'll be back in a month or whatever. So, email it. The other benefit to that is it makes it easy for the client to keep a copy or forward it to her insurance company or forward it to her sister or whomever else is interested in the report. So email is a really good way to deliver the final document. And you want to always send it password protected. And I personally recommend letting the client pick the password, because then they'll know the password and it'll be easy for them. Do that over the phone, because you don't want to email it. You don't want to email the password and then the document, because that defeats the point of if the email is compromised. So anyway, that's all about that. I think this is a good time for me to stop talking and let Joel take over. He is going to talk about some of the new challenges of this new world that we're living in. And thank you very much. Joel?
Laura, you just have to stop sharing your screen so that I can.
Sorry. Is that better?
Perfect.
Sorry, technically
No worries.
challenged.
All right, so my name is Joel Hassler. I am a CGA instructor and an ICGA based in Racine, Wisconsin. We decided that Laura would take some, I'd take some, and then, like I said, we'll do questions and answers at the end. The biggest changes that we've got right now, and there have been a few other webinars on it, so I'm going to touch on some of it in case you haven't seen those. The take-in and cleaning, it's going to be much more important than it used to be. The two main ways that we've seen or that have been talked about for cleaning and disinfecting, and actually AGS put it in a little document here, the isopropyl alcohol and barbicide, both are useful in different ways. Isopropyl alcohol at 70% only needs to be in for about 30 seconds, and that's from a report by the University of Colorado Health. The barbicide, per their website, and living with a hairstylist for the last 20 years, I've come to know a little bit about it, takes up to 10 minutes to work. That's actually why you'll see it sitting, combs and all that stuff sitting in the barbicide the whole time at the salon. My recommendation of what I'll be doing is the barbicide will work great for relieving your tweezers or anything that you might poke at the jewelry to see if stones are loose. The isopropyl alcohol will be what I'll use for the initial cleaning after it's been cleaned, and then we're going to put it back in there. Like I said, it's most likely going to be a multi-step process. I met with 3 people on Saturday, ran through this, and it worked really well. Was in the alcohol for a minute or so while I was gathering their information. Then we went and did the checking under scope, cleaned it, ultrasonic, steamed, and then back into the alcohol before I gave it to them again. I'm using a different batch for each customer. You can do it. It's going to depend on how much business that you do. I've just got little 2-ounce, the plastic ramekins. That way it's confined to that one customer. All their stuff usually fits in there. If it's a big necklace or something, you may have to wipe it down, but it works great. And I just toss this out. If you're doing a lot, this might not be convenient, but it worked for me. And I've got just half a dozen made up on my desk. Customers seem to think it was a neat idea. So I'll use a different batch for each customer. The report itself, that's all I've got on the cleaning stuff. If you got questions, you can put them in the question and answer, and we'll get to those at the end. Different things with the reports. I've talked with Jewelers Mutual, a handful of other insurance agents and underwriters. Each appraisal is going to be different and possibly treated differently by the insurance company. You're going to need to be real detailed with your reports and statements. How much you've inspected the pieces, if you've inspected the pieces. Some of the responses that I got were, it's going to be case by case if you're updating something versus if it's new. If you're updating something and you were the one who did it originally, it might be how long has the piece been insured. If they've had it insured for 15 years, the insurance company might say, yeah, we're going to let it go that you haven't inspected it recently, or we're going to take it on your word. It's really hard to do our job though without seeing it. I know USPAP doesn't require an inspection, and one of the advisory opinions that goes into details as to what you would have to do if you don't inspect it. There has to be a statement that you didn't inspect it. But it's really hard for us in our business to be able to properly do an appraisal. And if you get too many limiting conditions and too many assumptions, the insurance company will most likely just flat out deny it and say, look, we need more information than that, or we need to know it exists. There won't be a one size fits all statement. Everybody's always looking for a silver bullet. What can I put in there that's going to fix everything and be the one thing that they need? So that just won't exist. It's going to be different for each thing. The market changes. That's where this is going to get a little confusing too, depending on the type of appraisal that you're doing. I'll be telling all of my clients for probably the next month or 2 or 3, who knows, that it's probably going to be worth having these items reevaluated once the market normalizes. I'm not going to say it goes back to normal, or we don't know what it's going to be like. Depending on what you're appraising, I know Christie's just sent out an email this morning. they've still been having auctions. The watch guys are still selling watches. Your, Chronos 24, Bob's Watches, they're all still doing business. There are jewelers still doing business. And depending on what it is, they might not be doing too many discounts. Everybody thinks, oh my gosh, there's going to be great deals to be had when all this is done. Not necessarily. They might need to keep those margins there to get back to where they were. So I'll be telling my clients, once this is over, you could do it right away, or at minimum, have it updated within a year. How you want to handle the charges, that's going to be up to you. If you're going to charge a normal update fee, if you're going to say it's included because of the situation, I'm not going to tell you one way or the other what you should do with that. The assumptions I kind of talked on before with the personal inspections, there's going to be some pretty big assumptions that way if you don't look at the piece. Just be aware what those might be. There's been a lot of, many of the other appraisal organizations, I know NAJA, the Appraisers Association have all put out varying statements. I decided it didn't make too much sense to type one up right now because you can really just modify what you've already got. If you're doing appraisals that are USPAP compliant and you have taken USPAP courses, you're going to understand how that works, what modifications you need to make to your disclaimers to make sure you're properly covered. Delivery, Laura talked about this a little bit, and then like you pointed out, I've got electronic signatures. All of my appraisals start as digital. If they want a printed copy, I will print it, but the original report, the native form of my appraisals is all digital. The digital signature for me, it's the highest level encryption that you can get, short of government work. It's a USB thumb drive. It's only my computer. It's my passcode that gets entered. And then once that's signed, that PDF can't be modified by myself, by anybody. It is permanently locked. It does not take a password to open it, but it can't be modified or looked at. If it has to get printed, we're going to print from that digital, and then that's when I'll use an embosser over my name or whatever. But everything has that symbol in the digital encryption. I use a company called Global Sign. There's many other places out there that do that. I think mine is $300 a year maybe for unlimited signatures. And it's a process. It was about a 20-minute phone interview. It's kind of like them notarizing and proving that I am who I say I am. I had to sign for the USB drive when it showed up. So it's really, really protected that way. When you see one of the PDFs open up, maybe you've gotten something from attorneys or banks or whatever, there'll be a bar across the top that'll say all signatures have been verified. It's an independent third-party verification to make sure that signature matches. If you're going to send it electronically, I know different appraisers have different opinions on this. I will send it to an insurance agent if they request. Got a form that they sign where we know it's only going to be sent to this person at this address, whether it's an attorney or an appraiser, an insurance agent or an attorney. I will deliver it electronically to them if they ask. And then, like I said, make sure it's protected from modification, whether that's the digital signature. You can also inside, I know Adobe in PDF, you can restrict printing too, where they won't be able to print the document at all. They'd have to come to you to have a printed copy of it. The way I look at it too is because mine start as digital, any printed copy is a copy. It's not an original document. For USPAP purposes, according to some communication with NAJA for clarification, as long as you've done it electronically or in paper, you can keep an electronic backup. So that's why I choose to do it that way. I think that's all I've got. We've got some questions. I think I see a few questions came in. And let's see.
I just have one question, Joel. Someone asked how I deal with the signature when I do the email, and I have my signature saved like I would save a photograph on my desktop, and then I just bring it in, and that way I can save it within the PDF and it becomes a part of the whole. So it's very easy. So if it's a document I'm going to email, that's how I do it.
Yep. And mine is done, like I said, through that little thumb drive. That image on the slide, it's my company seal and then my signature through the middle. And then over to the side, it'll say it's digitally signed, it timestamps it. So lots of different ways to go about doing that. Another question I was told, pictures on the appraisals do the opposite of helping due to insurance company finding something online that is similar enough. I like the looks of pictures and find them helpful. Would you always say yes, put a picture on the appraisal? And yes, I say always put a picture on the appraisal. Biggest reason, it doesn't, it helps your clients. That's really what this is about. It's not about you getting a sale because you did the appraisal, or it's the protection for your client, that in the event you can't create it without that picture, you do miss out on some of the finer details that maybe you missed in your narrative. So yes, always, always. Each of my appraisals comes with 3 pictures. I know the demo that was up there, I had sent to Laura, wasn't thinking that was an older one, but all of my appraisals have 3 pictures from different angles of the piece. So yes, definitely always pictures. Can you please share, if you haven't already, the lab-grown diamond disclosure? Can you read yours? There is an official AGS one. I do not have it memorized. I apologize, but we can get that sent out. I think we have a way to get those sent to everybody.
I'm going to see if I can find it on my computer.
Okay.
While you're answering more questions.
I know it's in the AGS appraisal forum on Facebook. If you aren't already on that, please go ahead and join that, and then Laura or I will get that approved. And we put different questions and answers on there already. So I know it's on there. Kaz has shared it. I believe Laura and I have each shared it too. So if Laura can find it, great. If not, we'll get that on Facebook. Let's see. How does it work? You said you use good paper and make it look good and worth the fees you're charging versus only emailing the document. I'm not sure I'm understanding that question. If I'm printing it, and Laura, you can jump in too. If I'm printing it, it goes on nicer letterhead and stapled. All of my appraisals start at about 14 or 15 pages, depending on what the piece is or how many items there are, but it includes pages with the 4 Cs and some GIA images of the color and clarity charts and a little explanation of how we grade color, how we grade. Mine's quite a bit more educational on some of that stuff. In my document, I include Kaz's list of questions that is in his book, the questions for the customer to ask their insurance agent. So in terms of that, we've seen when Laura and I graded the CGA tests last time, there was a wide range. Some people laminated every page. Some people had spiral bound. Some people just had staples. There's so many different options. It's hard to endorse one over the other. Hopefully
well, and it's okay. There doesn't need to be just one form, right? It just needs to look good and represent you and your store and you and your brand, right? So everyone's going to be a little different.
Yep.
I did find the disclaimer.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you want to share that? Oh, here, I'll stop sharing my screen if you want to.
Oh, I'm going to read it. It's on on a different computer. I'm sorry, but here, let me read it and then we'll post it in the group too. With the advent of a sizable quantity of treated and synthetic diamonds now in the marketplace, identification is very difficult, especially in very small sized stones without the use of sophisticated laboratory equipment. In this case, we have made a critical assumption and have valued the diamonds as natural unless otherwise indicated.
And yeah, we'll post that as well. Question, do you always research what trademarks are on the piece or just mention what's on the piece? I personally always research. I'd probably appraise 1,000 individual pieces a year or thereabouts. So a lot of them you just start to recognize over time, but yes. And while it's not necessarily a sales pitch, the website I like to use is Appraiser Under Oath. It's Bill Hofer's site. Bill wrote the ICGA course, the Advanced Personal Property Appraiser course that we have to take to be ICGAs. I think it's $200 a year. The database has got 25 or 30,000 different trademarks in there, and he does update them when things come up. He gives a little history of when the trademark was registered, if it's still current, if it's expired. It's got a really neat search feature. So I always research and always type a description if I know what it is, or if it's unknown, I'll say it's unknown, but this is what it looks like. And something that's taught in that class that I definitely do is the statement, it bears a trademark attributed to, because there's no way for you to know with 100% certainty that that trademark was put in by that designer or put in after the fact. I mean, I've seen goldsmiths try and recreate, after they sized a ring and they had to take it out for sizing, they'll try and recreate that trademark. So it's always bears a trademark attributed to make sure you've got that covered. What else do we got here? 70% isopropyl alcohol will kill the COVID virus. Depending on the sources that you read, it will disinfect and remove it. That's what's in the wipes that you're going to use to wipe things down. To use the term kill the virus, that I'm not an expert on that. I just know the research that I've done from University of Minnesota, University of Colorado, that 70% is the ideal ratio to disinfect and properly remove that virus and make it. It's what's in the hand sanitizers, the wipes, that sort of stuff. So I'm not going to definitively say, yes, it kills it. All I know is the research shows that that is what is recommended. And then if you go beyond that, if you go beyond 90, don't use 91 or 99. I know you can buy gallons of 99 and that'll fry it before it has a chance to kill it and it evaporates so fast. So hopefully that answers that.
I'll take if you sell a mounting and set the customer's diamond, which document would you use? I would definitely use the report as opposed to appraisal, because, in that case, at least part of it, you had an interest in and you sold. And so you don't want to in my opinion, you don't want to take any chances. Just err on the side of caution.
Do you charge for reprints for lost appraisals? I personally do not. But
I don't.
Everybody's different. Some people charge for updates. Some people don't charge for updates. There's all kinds of different answers for that. But no, I personally do not charge if I have to reprint an appraisal. I'm not sure. There's another one that just says retail versus online. So whoever.
I think the first half of that question is how do you treat markup? I think retail versus online, but I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Yep. I don't understand what that question is. So if you're still on and you want to re-ask, that would be great, or help us understand that a little more. What is your opinion of the program Instapraise? I'm roughly familiar with it. Every program, there's going to be pros and cons to every program out there. None is perfect. What I look for, I personally use the gem appraisal software from Richard Drucker at Gemworld. For me, why I chose that one over others, and again, personal preference, I love the customization ability that comes with the reports, especially in the new version that came out last year. You can really update and make a much more professional document. So I don't know enough about Instapraise to have an opinion one way or the other. And I know in the CGA program, when Laura and I teach it, I think the last class when we did Instapraise wasn't quite as popular as it is. So we'll look into that one a little bit more. But like I said, any program, there's pros and cons, and the essence of an appraisal is being able to do and modify, make each appraisal unique if you need to. So I don't like the catch-all. Let's just let the software do all the work.
Agreed. I agree with you on that. I'm not really familiar with it either. I haven't used it, but that the theory of being able to modify every appraisal, because every one of them is unique. You know, you can't just use a formula, obviously, or we wouldn't need us. Someone asked, how does it, you said use good paper, make it look good and worth the fees you charge versus only emailing the document. That's a fair point. You know, if they print it, if they never print it, then it's not going to ever look as good as the beautiful document you would have handed them. But that's, I don't know how to answer that other than that's just technology. So if
Yep,
you're going to give them, if you're going to give it to them, you want it to look really good when you hand it to them, I think is my point.
Yep. I charge the same, and that's where, because I say I start with a digital copy, that's what I'm actually doing. If they want me to print it, great, but my fee is for an electronic digital version of that. So I don't charge any different if I'm printing or emailing. Let's see. If you know it was purchased from Blue Nile or James Allen, does that influence your appraisal? One of the first things Kaz taught us, and Kaz taught everyone, I can't talk. Do you want the item replaced identically? If they say, yes, I want it replaced identically, then we're going to go back to those original sources, because the internet throws it off a little bit, because there's nothing saying those companies or any online company would be around. Not that there's anything saying a retail store would, but if they say, yes, they want it replaced identically, then we're going to go try and find items that would be replaced identically, and then put that in our narratives that the customers requested that this is where we replace it.
What kind of software do you use to handle invoices and record keeping? When do you collect your fee? Oh, collect your fee before. Always. I personally use QuickBooks, and I'll handwrite an invoice, or sometimes I'll print one depending. If I'm going to email it, I'll just I'll generate one online. But definitely collect your fee. I have right now sitting in my safe some emeralds, which I appraised for a lawyer at liquidation value, and it's been 6 months, and I made the mistake of emailing him the report before he came and picked them up and paid me for it. So always get your fee before you send the appraisal. Stupid mistake, and live and learn, right?
Or anything similar to Geller's book regarding pricing for appraisal services? What sort of fee structure do we each use? I don't know of anything. Funny you should say that, because Geller's book has a section on what to charge for appraisals if you do those. We generally suggest in the class and in Kaz's book is the best way to cover yourself to make sure you're charging properly is to charge by the hour, not by the piece. Everybody does a little bit differently. There's not a right or wrong way, but yes, by the hour is the best way. My fair market value, if I'm doing anything for estate purposes, is always by the hour, and your by the hour fee is really going to be based on your level of expertise. If you're a GG who just got their CGA and you've been appraising for a year, 2 years, you're not going to be able to charge what Laura, I might charge, and I don't get to charge anywhere near what Kaz charges. So it's just like an attorney or a doctor. The more experience you've got, the more you can charge, but don't be afraid to charge what you feel is a fair price for your time. I think, Laura, you said $125 an hour is kind of what you value your time to be worth.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's down to when you're doing this, because it's what your time is worth.
Right. I look at it as it's going to take me about an hour between, the appointment and the gathering the information and the photographs and putting it all together in the document, and the whole thing, even if it's simple, it's going to take me close to an hour. Right. So I just generally tell people it starts at $125. Once I see everything you have, then I can give you a price for the whole assignment. But it's not so much that I tell them $125 an hour. I just tell them that's where it starts. And occasionally, if it's just something that takes me 5 minutes, because it's a 5mm comfort fit wedding band, maybe I'll charge them $95. because I feel bad otherwise, but I shouldn't feel bad, but you know.
Yeah, and same thing. If you had a plain gold wedding band and a diamond ruby or a necklace with 60 diamonds,
Right.
are you really going to charge the same for each of those? And you shouldn't. If you
Right.
are, you're leaving a lot of money on the table because one is significantly more work than the other, or a charm bracelet with 32 charms that each has to be tested because some are gold filled, some are 14 karat, some are 10 karat, some have no mark, so hourly is the way to go, but sometimes people don't always understand that. So I'd say I've seen it done both ways. How do you determine markup in general? That is kind of a tough answer. There is a survey that's put out, and I know it's in Kaz's book. I think the most recent chart, it was a JA, what markup is generally for price points and diamonds and color. And initially, you should be trying to find market comparables and not necessarily use a markup if you're looking for things that were sold in the market and what it actually sells for. Markup is irrelevant. If you have to do a cost approach where you're using a markup, that's going to depend on where you are, where the piece is, where the client is, because it's going to be different anywhere. A retailer in the Midwest can probably get more of a markup than a retailer in Philly. So markup is really hard. It depends on your region. If you have a subscription to the guide, I know Bill Hofer again just wrote an article for Richard about the cost approach and using markups. I believe that was free even if you weren't a subscriber, so you might be able to find that on their website. I think all right, that's not a question, but thank you, Carter. If there aren't any other questions, I think that's all that I've got, unless you've got something else to add at this point, Laura.
I do not, but we would encourage everybody to join the appraisal group on Facebook. And, people always ask really good questions there and get lots of good answers from many, many experienced people.
And that's AGS Appraisal Forum is the name of the group on Facebook.
Right.
One of the questions came in, what's the name of the place to locate the markups?
It's in Kaz's book. If you have the book, there's a chart in there. And then also, I think, Joel, you said Gem Guide publishes a markup survey?
No, JA, I think was
JA.
the...
JA, right, JA does. Yeah. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you so much for attending. Stay well.
Thank you. Talk to you guys later.
See y'all in Lexington.